Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Sanctuary's Coffee and Conversation. I'm Myrna Haskell, Executive Editor of Sanctuary Magazine. This is an online publication for women that empowers and inspires with a focus on the arts, philanthropy, health and wellness, inspirational travel, career, and finance. You can find us at sanctuary-magazine.com. This morning, my guest is Karen Warner Schueler. She is the author of The Sudden Caregiver, which, by the way, was excerpted in Sanctuary earlier in the year, so you can find that under book excerpts. She is also president of the Tangible Group. This is a consulting and coaching firm that focuses on caregiver well-being. Good morning, Karen. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Myrna Beth. So nice of you to have me on today.
And I'm so excited about this because it's our Aging Gracefully issue, and caregiver challenges is a big part of many, many listeners' lives. And it's such an important topic. And so we're going to talk about how to manage stress and work-life balance when you're a primary caregiver. But I wanted to start out talking about your personal journey, because you became a sudden caregiver when your husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I was just wondering if you'd like to share with our listeners some of the challenges, the initial challenges especially, that you came across when that happened to you.
Well, the first one is that there's never enough time to have someone in your home have a healthcare crisis. So what first happened was I had a fully deployed life, so did my late husband, and we had to find the time to be sick and the time to be caregivers. So it is a real stressor, and that was one of the first things that happened, is just, where am I supposed to get, what do I give up and what do I incorporate? At the same time, our daughter was 2 weeks away from getting married when we got the diagnosis in San Diego on the other side of the country. So we were really trying just to juggle everything and try to figure it out. And then the other thing is, another really big challenge was our finances. Just like, if we're suddenly we have a 2-income lifestyle and we're suddenly going to go down to 1 income, and that income is going to be mine, it brought up a lot of things about what are our resources, where are our wills, where's our legal documentation, where's our paperwork. And 59% of people in the US do not have their paperwork lined up. We were in that group. And so it was at a time when you're dealing with so many things that are really life and death. I'm also in the back of my mind going, what happens if I need to make this all go all by myself? And how do we do that? And what are our savings? And and I think that's
many stressors.
And that's so common for caregivers, for sure.
That's, what about and this idea that, there's so many things, as you mentioned, that were going on in your life. Lots of times caregivers, they might be part of that sandwich generation where they still have children at home. They're caring for an elderly parent. They might work part-time or full-time and not be able to give up one salary for one reason or another. I'm just thinking of all these different situations because so many people are going through it, right? So what is your advice for how to meet that challenge head on, that work-life balance, that juggling all the different life's responsibilities and staying sane, I guess, in the process?
Right. Well, caregivers make up about 17% of the workplace. So I'm an executive coach. So what I know from the research is that every single day when we go into work, there's about 12 people that rely upon us, who we impact and influence. So that's 2 out of every of those 12 are caregivers, and they often don't ask for help. So you may not even know, you might know they're caring for their aging parents or, juggling their kids and caregiving. But just like when I was a single mom and I had a small child at home, I didn't go into the office and share all of the personal issues that go on around just that kind of care situation. So the first thing I would say is, and everyone's work situation is different, so use caution, but it is okay to share with people you trust in the workplace what's going on with you. When you don't have to go into a lot of detail, my late husband would not have wanted me to share, the extent of our diagnosis. But you can say, especially if you're caring for aging parents, I may get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I have to go. And so as much as you can, just negotiate that. The second thing is to, I work with, as an executive coach, I work with employers who are saying, this person comes in late and I think she stops at her mother's on the way in, but I don't know, she's late for a meeting. As much as you can, try to negotiate that schedule. Like, I may disappear, but just know that this is because I will only do it if it's an urgent situation and I have to do it. And then work to get backup, your coworkers or someone to cover for the work product that you have, or have an agreement that you come back to it. And I have one more message, which is for the people who run the workplaces.
Okay.
This is a tsunami. Like, what's happening now with caregiving, especially with the numbers, 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. 65 is when chronic illness comes, and you're not, you could be smart, you could be healthy, it doesn't matter. You can get sick. So if we're standing watching a tsunami come and it's gonna hit the workplace, wouldn't we run for the high ground? And for me, running for the high ground, my advice is, if you run a workplace, find a way to include caregiver benefits into your already workplace benefits. And every workplace, at least in the US, and probably other countries do it better than we do, have ways to offer self-care for people, for their employees. Caregiving is one of those really special categories.
Yes.
And I've talked to people who are trying to figure out, what would that look like if we subsidize people with caregiving situations, or gave them some short-term leave or paid leave or something like that. So really take that on, because it's going to hit you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's great advice. But as you're talking about that, I thought of something. Do you think part of the reason why people don't share with their employer or their boss what's going on, because they don't want to burden that person, or they feel like they're taking advantage? Or what do you think that the general feeling behind that is, that they're afraid to share in some circumstances?
I think it has a lot to do with, well, there are a number of things. One is, caregivers are notorious. Like, there's something that 50% of caregivers don't let anyone know they're caregivers, and they don't ask for help. And that has to do with that sort of circle of agency you have with the care receiver. That's one thing. There's another thing, which is self-sufficiency. I only have this many hours in the day. I know if I ask myself to do it, I'm going to get it done. If I ask someone else to do it or to help me, it may not get done. So we tend to hold our cards close to our vest. But another thing is, and it goes back to my analogy of being a working mom, if you signal that you have this home health situation that may impede your performance on the job, you're also impeding possibly raises, promotions. I mean, it's just human nature to go, no, I'd like to promote Karen, but it looks like she's really busy at home. And caregivers work about 21 to 34 extra hours, unpaid, uncompensated, untrained, doing caregiving at home. And so that's an extra chunk of time where you're not focused on, your business strategy and the vision of the company that you work for.
Yes, that's right. And it's really, it's an energy sucker, I mean, how do you have the energy to move forward? It's such a tough thing. And on top of that, lots of times that primary caregiver is dealing with the sadness, depression, angst, fear, anger of the person they're taking care of, whether they're elderly or infirm or have a terminal illness, whatever it may be. And the person might sit there and think, why me? Why are they behaving badly toward me? I'm the one taking care of you, that whole thing. And so I really want to dig into that a little bit, because I've talked to many, many people who go through this, and I know it is a common thing. So do you have any advice for listeners who may be going through that right now?
Yeah, it is a universal problem. It is not any one particular caregiver and what they're doing, or care receiver and what they're doing. So I think the first thing is to grant your care receiver some grace. They're ill. And it is a huge deal to go from being independent and autonomous and then suddenly realize you aren't thinking as clearly, or you aren't as mobile as you were, or you're dealing with, you've got to use all your energy to fight a disease. I recently found out I needed surgery on my eye. I needed a biopsy. And for about 3 weeks, I was told I had metastatic cancer. I don't, thank God.
Oh, thank goodness.
But,
oh, thank
yeah.
goodness. But how scary. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So here I was, the care receiver, and it narrowed my world down. And I don't think I behaved badly, but you can understand why someone going through that. So the first thing
the
is
overwhelm.
Yeah.
The overwhelm of it.
So just grant that person a little bit of grace. Also, I would say the anger is not, it's emotional, it's not logical. So if I make a really great dinner and I put it in front of my husband and I say, look, I made you this really great dinner. He goes, I didn't want pork chops, I wanted steak. I can argue, that could turn into a whole fight, revealing some of the things that happened in my world. And so, but it's not about the pork chops, right? So I can go, what are you talking about? I just made this really great dinner. You're so ungrateful. But it's not about the pork chops. So don't try to make your case and don't argue it. It's really about, and so that becomes, let's manage our emotions. And there are ways to do that.
Okay.
So one way of managing your emotions is your brain when it gets hooked into anger, it just wants more anger. So change your body chemistry. And these are simple things that anyone can do. If you're in the car, roll down the window, get some fresh air, turn on the radio, get some music, or anything that shifts the mood in your brain, in yourself. And it's a cliche to say, I teach conflict management, just regular, ordinary conflict management. And the one rule of conflict management is you cannot change another person. So how can you change yourself? And those cliches of count to 10, take a walk, go outside in nature, those things are actually really helpful.
Okay.
So the first thing I do, and the other thing is, it's not just the person in your care who gets angry or frustrated at you as a caregiver, it's their relatives and family members who are also threatened with losing this person.
And it's almost, it feels probably like a pile on to the caregiver.
Right.
Why is everybody on me? I'm doing the best I can. I'm working all these extra hours, as you said. Actually, Karen, I was really surprised at those statistics that it's over 21 on average or whatever it is. I mean, no wonder. So the caregiver also is exhausted and stressed out. And then you have, the person who's ill or elderly or hurting or whatever it is, they're going through their stuff. So it's like a double whammy, right? You have two people who are not totally at the top of their game for different reasons. And now you're having behavioral problems or arguments, or I think a lot of times maybe it's the caregivers, starts to feel guilty or personally assaulted and doesn't step away from it and say exactly what you asked our listeners to do. If they're in this situation, count to 10, take a walk. Don't show more anger. It's just going to escalate the situation, right?
Yeah. And I will say there's a lot to be said for having outside support, whether you see a counselor who helps you through that, or go to a caregiver support group. I had that where I could physically go to a support group for 1 hour a week and say whatever I wanted to say. And everybody is there to, they can't solve it for you, but they can support you and you can be heard.
And they're going through it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so that must be, I was going to ask you about supports, because, oh my God, it must feel like you're alone a lot of the time, right?
Well, you are, and you have all these people piling on and you're defending yourself, but at the same time, they have very good reasons for feeling the way they feel. So doing anything, again, to manage your own emotions. And during COVID, one of the things I heard from caregivers is, I have a support group, but I can't go. They turned it into a Zoom support group, right? It's a Zoom support group, but he's right here. Like, I can't vent and I can't say. And so those are the kinds of things where I think my advice then was, and even now as it still goes on, really carve out that private space in your home. I have one person who dials in from her car.
that works.
the support group. Yeah.
And she has her own little bubble around her that way.
Yeah, whatever you need to do. And it is possible, but it's not organic to how you've been living. So you have to find a way to do that.
You know, you brought up something really, really important just that moment ago, and that's this lack of time, right? Which is bringing the frustration, the stress, all of that. So do you have any other ideas? I love this idea of trying to find a support group and figuring out a way that you can do it, whether it's by phone, whether it's, you know, whatever you need to do, because, you know, those people are going through the same thing. So if you're talking to somebody who's not going through it, you probably don't feel like they really understand what's happening. But I'm wondering do you have any other like resources, online resources or places, or maybe even suggestions in local communities, how caregivers can reach out to get some help? What are some other ways they can do that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the time thing, one of the things that's the most obvious thing available right away is to be able to be the person who can ask for help. I'm not that person, but I became that person. But then ask for help in a way that's a little selfish. What are the things that are taking up your time that you don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be you doing them? And who in your world that you're in a reciprocal relationship with? In other words, if you were broken down on the side of the road, they'd come and get you. If they were broken down, you'd go and get them. You know who those people are and they want to help. So ask them to do something specific. Call the insurance company, fix the runny faucet, whatever it is that is not something you're good at or something you don't want to do. That will give you a little bit of time because they don't require you to entertain them. They just want to come in and do their job for you.
Right. And I think that links back to what you said earlier in the conversation when we were talking about somebody being afraid to ask for help. They don't want to ask for help maybe with the actual caregiving itself for numerous reasons. Maybe they think they'll micromanage anyway. It's not really going to help them. So that's a great point. Find help in those other areas to ease other life stresses so that you can focus more on the care without going out of your mind.
Yeah, exactly. In my book, I call it creating a care leading squad. So
I like that.
Who are your numbers? What's your numbers person? Who's your therapist? Who's your cheerleader? My best friend would open the front door, hand me a cup of Starbucks and go up and clean out closets. So if you are clear and can ask for that help. But then in terms of resources, one of the things that I note about caregivers, and it was true of me, is I was never a caregiver before. So I don't know where the resources are. And so what was I doing? Paying out of my pocket. And caregivers spend about $5,000 unreimbursable out of their pocket every year. So on my website, www.thesuddencaregiver.com, I have a resources tab. And I collected, as I was writing my book, as many resources as I could find. Many of them are disease state resources like the American Cancer Society or Heart Association or Alzheimer's Association. And those resources, if you're dealing with a disease state, odds are there's an organization.org geared toward that disease state. They are a rabbit warren of resources for caregivers if you know to go there and look for them. There are webinars, there are all kinds of things they offer.
I wouldn't have thought of that. That is a great tip. And your book has some of this. So folks, don't forget The Sudden Caregiver by Karen Warner Schueler. Please go out and get it. You can look at an excerpt from the book in Sanctuary Magazine. It sounds like there's just I've read parts of it, wasn't able to read the whole thing at this point, but I just know so many people who have struggled with this and their health started to go as well.
Yes.
And I think that's really common too.
That's so common. Yeah.
So if you can get, a grasp on this early on, because we know, I think sometimes we have to be reminded that if we don't take care of ourselves first, we can't take care of somebody else, right? So that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And there's evidence that says that if you do take care of yourself, the other person in your care has a better experience, which you never know where that could go and how that could help. But in terms of self-care, the really simple way to think about it is, what did your mother tell you when you were growing up? Eat your vegetables. So eat right. Get a good night's sleep. try as hard as you can to get your sleep in. Hang out with the right people. So create your care leading squad. Have a hobby. So there's evidence that says if you take just 15-minute breaks, mini breaks throughout your day, or even just if you just got that 15 minutes, but you do it religiously every day, you'll get back some of the energy that you're spending. So caregivers notoriously deplete, but there are ways that we can manage our time, but you have to do it with intention.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Any final thoughts, Karen, before we close this out? Something maybe we didn't cover, or something else you want to say, or perhaps I know you mentioned your URL. Listeners, we will have that at the end of this conversation too, so you can write it down. But anything else you want to share with our listeners before we sign off?
Yeah. One of the lessons that I learned is, there were two lessons, and I think they're really important to remember if you're a caregiver. One is life is short. So you only have X number of hours yourself on this. We go around about 80 years, maybe, if we're lucky, a little longer, but basically life is short. And in my book, I have a quote by the late singer-songwriter Warren Zevon, who said, David Letterman said, you have terminal cancer. What are you going to do with your life? And he said, enjoy every sandwich. So I leave you.
I love that.
Yeah. And
that's a good Post-it quote for Sanctuary, Karen. We do Post-it quotes every month.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
The other thing is,
go ahead.
Grant yourself grace. So there's a quote from Emerson. I have it in my book, but it basically goes, finish each day and be done with it. You did your best.
So you're not looking back and worrying about mistakes that you've made. We all make them.
Let them go. Forget them as soon as you can.
I think people have a hard time with that too, right?
I've carried that quote. I actually have that quote stenciled on my front hallway wall for all my guests to see.
Oh,
yes,
I love
do.
That. That's great.
It keeps those gremlins that go in your head at bay.
Okay.
Forget it.
Thank you for that. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for this conversation. This is such an important topic. I urge listeners to contact Karen if they have any future questions, but thank you so much for being here with me on the show this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Myrna Beth. It was really great to talk to you. And I love this. It's National Family Caregiver Month. So
as well, yes, I know. So this was perfect for this month, right? So thank you so much for your wonderful expertise. I'll sign off, as I always do, by wishing all of our listeners and our readers good health, happiness, and continued inspiration. Have a great day.